I never saw this happening. I couldn't even have imagined it, and in the beginning, Gary Smalley was a guy who wrote relationship books, for the Christian market. He didn't write novels, and he had a real tender heart. He's passed away since, but, he was one of my original, like, if I had 100 readers, whatever that first, those first 6 books, he was reading those books, and I didn't know that. And he contacted me through his people, and he said, "Look, I wanna meet you. I wanna meet your family. Like, your books are the best I've ever read. Like, they're changing my life. I love them. I'm crying on airplanes between events, and, I just love them." So my husband and I took our kids. We went out. They lived near, Table Rock Lake in Branson, Missouri, and we he took us out on the lake, he and his wife, and just spent some time with us. And then at the end of the time, he said, "Look, I have some relationship teachings that I think would be better told in novel form. I don't write novels, and I don't have anything to do with novels, but I would be honored to partner with you. I'm having a new contract," and, like, his contracts were way bigger than what my contracts could have possibly been, and he just said, "If we could, basically partner for a few books, I would sure love that," and he said, "Think series." And that's really all the direction that I had at that point. His first one that he wanted to principle that he had been teaching all of this time was, "Love is a decision." And so that was what I had. I had Think Series, Love is a Decision. On the flight home, I had a notepad. I love to dream up stories on flights. Something about being 30,000 feet up, and you can't really do anything else. And God puts these movies in my heart that become these stories. Like, I can see it, and I'm just writing as fast as I can. And I really love writing those with a pen and paper, like the story ideas. And in that one 4-hour flight, as we returned to the West Coast, all of the Baxter details, all of the Baxter family elements came to me. So it was this, Dr. John, his wife Elizabeth, the 5 kids, which we had 5 kids, 4 girls and a boy. We had 4 girls and a boy. So there was some similarities to what I had known growing up. And I found myself processing out, like, literally the storylines and the ups and downs and problems for 5 books. I had the titles, I could see it all by the time I landed. And then I quickly wrote the first book, which was Redemption, and I shared it with my dad, and this is the best. My dad read it. He was a softie as well, and he just, like, he was wiping his tears, and he would always tell me when I was growing up. My dad was, as more of a mentor long term than Bob Scheibel had been. I mean, he would say, "Karen, somebody has to be the next best-selling author, and I think it's gonna be you." And I'd be, like, 10, and I wrote a short story, and he could just see my future, and so, of course, I shared it with him first, and, he said, "You know what?" He goes, "Karen, this is so good. You need to share it with that Roma Downey, that Touched by an Angel woman, because she is gonna love this. She'll wanna make it into a series." And, this was, like, I don't even know, no, it was, I mean, 91 or something, like, a long time ago. And, I said, "Well, Dad, I don't have her number, so" but that's nice, that's a nice thought. Well, it was, after he had already passed, that I got the call from her, and by then, I've been writing and writing about the Baxters, and the turning point for me was after I was on book 4, and it was only gonna be a 5-book series, and Gary Smalley and I were partnering on that. He dropped off after that because he said, "Look, this is your thing, and it's taking off," and his prayer actually was that my books would become so big, people wouldn't know who he was, but that they would be so thrilled, to be able to read a book from me. So really that happened. I mean, God is so good. Like, at that point, I couldn't fathom that because he was very well known, and he still is, but it's just, life moves on. And so I was at a soccer game, and I was watching the kids play, and this woman, 4, lawn chairs down, was talking to her friend, and she was older, and she said, "I just wish that one day we could have Joey here, and Joe, or, I wish that one day I could have the whole family here to watch Joey play soccer." And so the friend said, "What do you mean, the whole family?" And she said, "Well, I've never told you this, but my husband and I had a child out of wedlock, and we were forced to give this child up for adoption. My dad wouldn't let me keep the baby, and we ended up getting married anyway, me and my husband, and we have 5 other kids, but now this one, the 6th, the oldest, we none my the other kids don't know about it, like, it's this big thing, and I just wish we could connect again." And I thought, "Wait a minute, that's what happened to Elizabeth and John. They weren't perfect. They had a child before out of wedlock and were forced to give this child up and never found him, and what if Elizabeth was sick and in her final dying moments. What if this guy grew up to be the most famous actor of the time, like a Chris Pratt type person, and he had everything the world could offer, but he didn't have the best family, the Baxters. And what if he hired a PI? And what if he found them? All of us, it wasn't even halftime of the game. And so I knew. I called my agent and I said, there's more. I mean, I have so much more. There's a child no one's heard about. There's all these. So the Firstborn series is what followed the first 5 books. The Firstborn series was the spinoff of learning that there was a sixth, an oldest child, Dane, and he was a Hollywood actor. And so it becomes this very dramatic, he finds out about the Baxters, doesn't want to tell them because then they'll be exposed to his very public world. And that sort of just set me off. There was always another way I could mentally and emotionally check in with the Baxters, and they were always doing something noteworthy. I had to write about it. They were always in my heart. 24 books with the Baxters, and even then after that, I wrote maybe 8 standalones where they would be ancillary or minor characters in the story just to get a kind of a check-in pulse point for the readers that love them so much. Once I had the family, setting was the last thing to come. And, back then we didn't have Google Earth. Like you had to do a lot of your research in person. And so my husband and I took a trip kind of through the Midwest. And I was looking for something that did not feel East or West Coast, Southern or necessarily Northern. I mean, something really that anyone could relate to. I wanted it to have a lake. I wanted there to be a university nearby, and a kind of an older downtown with, art galleries and an art scene, and then, sort of, meandering fields and larger properties on the outskirts of town. And, I could do enough research to go, it feels like Bloomington. I like the name Bloomington as well. Then we went and took our trip there, and it sealed the deal. I could see them walking the streets. I could imagine them on the lake and, on paths at the park. And that was where they are. They're still there in my mind. I even today would say the thing I'm most excited about with the Baxters, with all of the books and prequels, and all the things, and the devotion, as much as I love the devotional, those children's books are some of my favorite things because hearing from their parents, they'll write in and they'll say, here's a letter from, my daughter, Carrie or whatever, and they'll send these letters and drawings. And the kids loving these stories, there's not a lot of material out there for children. And Tyler's very funny. So writing with him, he drew from real stories and funny moments of his own childhood, and we turn them into stories for the Baxter kids. And these are the children that we first meet when they're young adults. Now we're going back, and this is before cell phones, before internet, and they're living on, 7 acres outside of Bloomington. And there's imagination, and there's so much humor and so much tenderness. My daughter is reading them out loud right now to her 4 sons. And even though it really does, there's 4 girls in the family, but there's the brother Luke. And the kids and the parents who are loving those books is one of my favorite things when looking back on the whole career, because it brings in the new reader, the little reader, the one in this day and age. It's easy to there's so much to watch, there's so much on screen. So teaching kids to love reading, and give them books that are full of laughter and fun and values and not going to harm them. Ooh, that's been a blessing for sure. I remember we hit this point where it was like, okay, we're almost at 25 million, and then we went over 25 million, and now it's like somewhere between 25 and 30. And I thought I mean, it does start to, you say that's like a tremendous number. It's humbling. I always feel like the bigger it gets, we had our first Karen Kingsbury production movie in theaters in April, Someone Like You, based on my novel, a standalone novel. And, the it's I feel very much like I couldn't have done it alone. I feel like I do have the help of God, that He is with me. So He'll give me a movie in my head and I get the privilege of writing it. And when people come up to me in line, I think this is that intimate moment where they'll be crying and they'll say, "You changed my life. I got, my husband and I worked things out and we didn't get divorced," or, "I lost a child. I never would have gotten through it." Those kinds of moments. And I think, well, it's something, because I would never have known what she needed or what he needed to read. But God knew that, and that's where it becomes bigger than me. I think the bigger it gets, the smaller I feel in terms of a part of it, that I could write a story. God puts it on my heart for you, for your heart, for such a time as this, and only He could do that. So it feels collaborative with the Lord, and I'm just so excited. I still feel like the best and biggest is yet to come. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah. The next book is going to be Where the Sea Meets the Sky. A woman is about to marry this very wealthy guy who's in big pharma and, kind of a well-known person in those circles, and there's some sinister things going on, but she just doesn't know that, and she's concerned. She's gonna take a trip to go see her friend who was only a friend. He was in love with her, but just, and out at the beach. But she gets in an accident. She actually has, amnesia. She doesn't know who she is. Her stuff's been taken, and this she's gotten back to this small town, and the guy becomes part of the solution of helping her figure out who she is, and is very careful about not explaining their history. So it gives her a chance to sit on the shore with this guy and realize what's really important in life. And so it's a love story, but it has a bit of the crime element that, I wrote about when I was first becoming a reporter and I wrote crime stories. I don't want to write crime stories per se, but I do think a little bit of an element of that is, where your heart's beating a little faster, is enjoyable when you're doing a read. And it's still a love story, but it's got a lot of depth to it and a lot of, you know, oh my goodness, what's going to happen?